Well, we're starting today on a 2-week trek with Immanuel Kant. And I'd like today to be purely introductory. And then next time we'll be getting into the material from the Critique of Pure Reason, which will probably occupy us for 4 days. Then we'll have a day on the Critique of Practical Reason, about ethics, and a day on his religious views, something of that sort. So to introduce him, I think to see his project, his philosophical project, in relationship to that of his predecessors, probably be as hopeful as anything. The Critique of Pure Reason, which is his best known, longest, most difficult work, came out in 1781. And like David Hume, he felt that he needed to provide, in addition, a more popular view of the same sort of thing. And so some 10, 15 years later, he put out the Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics. Now, get a handle on this title. First of all, Prolegomena. Now, if you've heard the story about elephants, you can anticipate something. The story is about people from different backgrounds who wrote books on elephants. The Englishman wrote a 1-volume hardback introduction to the elephant, very decorous. The American, an elephant digest. The Frenchman, an illustrated book on the elephant's love life. And the German, a 3-volume Prolegomena to the study of the elephant. Well, this is his Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics. Now, get the point, more significantly, of the metaphysics. Because, in effect, David Hume became skeptical of any metaphysical knowledge, any knowledge of the nature of reality. All we know is appearances, phenomena. And beyond that, it's a matter of, at best, belief. So it's in the light of Hume's metaphysical skepticism that Kant defines his project as Prolegomena to any future metaphysic. That is to say, in the light of Kant, what are the prospects for metaphysics? You see. Now, he's explicit about that orientation in the introduction to the Prolegomena to any future metaphysics. So that I'll read some of this. Since the essays of Locke and Leibniz, you remember Locke's essay on human understanding and Leibniz's new essays on human understanding? Since their essays, or rather since the origin of metaphysics, so far as we know its history, pushing it further back, nothing has ever happened that could have been more decisive to its fate than the attack made on it by David Hume. He threw no light on this species of knowledge, but he certainly struck a spark by which the light might have been kindled had it caught some inflammable substance and had its smouldering fire been carefully nursed and developed. Hume started from a single but important concept in metaphysics, namely that of the connection between cause and effect, including its derivatives like force. He challenged reason, which pretends to have given birth to the concept of cause and effect itself, to answer him by what right she thinks anything could be constituted that if that thing be posited, something else must necessarily posit it, in the light of cause and effect. Now that's not a bad summation of what Hume did. And he goes on the next page, however hasty and mistaken Hume's inference may appear, it was at least founded on investigation. But Hume suffered the usual misfortune of metaphysicians, and take note of this if you're thinking of going into metaphysics, of not being understood. It's positively painful to see how utterly his opponents, Thomas Reid, Oswald, Beattie, two other Scottish realists, missed the point. For while they were ever taking for granted what Hume doubted, and demonstrating with zeal, often with impudence, what he never thought of doubting, they so misconstrued his valuable suggestion that everything remained in its old condition as if nothing had happened. The question was not whether the concept of cause was right or useful or indispensable. Of course, Hume thought it was. But whether that concept could be thought by reason a priori, independently of experience. Whether it possessed an inner truth independent of experience. That was Hume's problem. Solely a question concerning the origin, not the need, for the concept. Well, he goes on to point out that the Scottish realists' appeal to common sense really is not sufficient. He says it is indeed a great gift of God to possess plain common sense. But this common sense must be shown in action by well-considered, reasonable thoughts, not by appealing to it as an oracle, when no other rational justification of one's position can be advanced. And so he comes to his project in the light of this. I therefore first asked whether Hume's objection could not be put into a general form, and soon found that the concept of cause and effect was by no means the only concept by which the understanding thinks of things a priori, but rather that metaphysics consists altogether of a priori concepts. I sought to ascertain their number, and you'll find he thinks there are 12. But when I had satisfactorily succeeded in this by starting from a single principle, I proceeded to deduce these concepts, which I was now certain were not derived from experience. I proceeded to deduce them as Hume had attempted to derive them, but found they sprang from the pure understanding. So, in effect, he's going to try and respond to Hume by saying that the concept of cause and effect, over which skepticism developed, along with other basic metaphysical concepts, are, after all, not empirically derived, but are in some sense a priori. Okay? And later on, he goes on in this fashion. Metaphysics is properly concerned with synthetic a priori propositions. A priori propositions. And he concludes his preamble with this rhetorical flourish. Even Kant is capable of rhetorical flourish. All metaphysicians are therefore solemnly and legally suspended from their occupations until they shall have adequately answered the question, how are synthetic a priori propositions possible? Okay? For the answer contains the only credentials that they must show when they've anything to offer in the name of pure reason. But if they do not possess these credentials, they can expect nothing else of reasonable people who have been deceived so often than to be dismissed from their occupation without further inquiry. So he's ready to fire all the metaphysicians who cannot show cause why they shouldn't say. Well, his project, then, is pretty crucial. He recognizes that in the light of Hume's skepticism, the very possibility of doing metaphysics is in serious question. So if there's going to be any possible metaphysics in the future, any future metaphysic, then it's necessary by way of prolegomena to establish that such metaphysical concepts are a priori. Okay? Now, that's what he's trying to do. And I think we can come at it by trying to look at his own terminology. And this is terminology which he develops in the introduction to the Critique of Pure Reason. And that material you have in the anthology from 367 to about 377. I'm not suggesting that that introduction is nothing but terminology, but I think the terminology that he introduces provides an entree into the much larger picture. So let's look at that. He makes a distinction towards the outset, three philosophy: dogmatic, skeptical, and critical philosophy. Now, you have no difficulty identifying who or what he has in mind by skeptical. David Hume. Yes. The dogmatic philosophy, however, is the earlier metaphysicians. Those have made dogmatic metaphysical assertions without examining the basis. So he has in mind there, certainly, that continental rationalist tradition. You recall our diagram, where you have the continental rationalism of Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz, each of them developing their own metaphysical system using the methodology of Descartes, trying to say that there are certain axiomatic first principles from which everything else can be deduced. Now, that is dogmatic metaphysics. Okay. On the other hand, we have, at an earlier stage, people like Locke, who also seems to think that metaphysical knowledge is possible, though on an empirical basis, and Berkeley, of course, and their metaphysical conclusions would also qualify as dogmatic. So it's David Hume, the skeptic, and the dogmatic philosophers. We should say that while Leibniz was around 1700, there was a lot of other metaphysical philosophy going on in the 18th century before Kant. So that there were successors of Leibniz in the German rationalism of the 18th century. And it was under these people that Immanuel Kant had studied himself, so that he was raised in the rationalistic tradition that had derived from Descartes' methodological revolution, you see. Now, he tells us he was awakened from those dogmatic slumbers by reading David Hume. Those dogmatic slumbers being the uncritical metaphysical assertions of that kind of system. And certainly Hume should awaken such people. So when he ventures his own project, his project is critical philosophy. That is to say, trying to examine the conditions which would make metaphysics possible, criticizing the epistemological foundations of metaphysics, a critique in that sense. So his major work, in which he's now introducing us to, is called, you notice, a critique, critical philosophy, a critique of pure reason, pure, that is to say, a priori, without any empirical input. So he's trying to look critically at the possibilities that lie in pure reason, reason independently of experience, possibilities for metaphysics. Okay? A critique of pure reason, having to do with metaphysical knowledge and the traditional approach to metaphysical knowledge. So let's say having to do with traditional metaphysical knowledge. Okay? Now, you'll find that in addition to that first critique in 1781, he came up a little later with a second critique, a critique of practical reason. Now, the term practical reason, ever since Aristotle, has referred to ethical thinking. So this turns out to be a critique not of metaphysical knowledge, but of moral knowledge. Now, remember that in that metaphysical tradition, it was maintained that moral knowledge was as deducible from first truths as was metaphysical knowledge. You see? John Locke thought that in principle, at least, we should be able to derive moral knowledge in the same way as we get mathematical knowledge. Deductively. From intuitive first principles or something. Or from our knowledge of the nature of man, in the case of morals. And David Hume, in his first chapter to the Inquiry, you remember, distinguishes between abstract and practical philosophy, where abstract philosophy is about metaphysics, practical philosophy is moral philosophy. You see? And the phrase moral philosophy was really not just ethics, but political theory and anything else that had application to human action. So a critique of practical reason is a critique, then, of the epistemological status of moral knowledge. And subsequently, he produced a third critique. This was a critique of judgment. And that has to do with aesthetic judgment, aesthetic knowledge, both in regards to nature, where we come up with all sorts of judgments about the order. You see, the orderedness of nature was the thing that the 18th century scientific mind was so set on. The orderedness of nature, the beauty of nature. So in aesthetic judgment in regards to nature, and in regards to works of art. Now, aesthetic knowledge had been likened to moral knowledge by David Hume and by some of the moral sense philosophers. You see? So having dealt with moral knowledge, he now comes to this other, aesthetic knowledge. raises questions there. And in each case, what he is looking at, trying to look at, is the preconditions that would make knowledge judgments possible. The preconditions for the very possibility of moral knowledge, of aesthetic knowledge, metaphysical knowledge. Now, you might note this in anticipation, that the critique of pure reason comes to the conclusion that there is no possibility of metaphysical knowledge in the traditional sense that involves objectivity and logical certainty. Okay? Dogmatic certainty in matters of metaphysics is not possible. And that applies to the three areas of metaphysics which were dominant in his day. They divided in the German rationalist tradition metaphysics into three parts. Christian Wolff, one of them, divided it into philosophical psychology, philosophical cosmology, and philosophical theology, dealing obviously with mind, nature, and God. Of course, when he's talked about those three, there isn't a great deal left to talk about. Nature, mind, and God. So it's pretty embracing. So his conclusions about natural theology, theology by reason alone, are negative. He critiques the arguments for the existence of God on the basis of lacking adequate preconditions that make it possible. But here's the interesting thing that he goes on to argue that metaphysical belief is possible on the basis, yes, of some things in the traditional approach to metaphysics, but is possible on the basis of moral and aesthetic knowledge. So it's on this basis, as well as on this basis, that we develop, appropriately, metaphysical beliefs. So again, you get the distinction between knowledge and belief. You see? Kant critiques the possibility of metaphysical knowledge, logical certainty, but finds in all three of his critiques that there is a basis for certain metaphysical beliefs, including belief in God. So that's the overall picture. Now, we have to add that his desire to make this accessible led to more readable and briefer versions of the first two. So the briefer version of the first one is the thing I read to you from just now, the prolegomena to any future metaphysic. Okay? And the briefer version of the critique of practical reason is the metaphysical foundations of morals. And typically, the selection about Kant's categorical imperative in ethics, which we have people read in introductory courses, comes from the metaphysical foundations of morals. Okay? So, that's the picture. He did do a work also specifically on religion, called Religion Within the Bounds of Reason Alone, where you can see he's asking about the possibilities of religious knowledge independently of revelation. What sort of knowledge of God do we get that way? Okay. We'll have something to say about all of these works over the next couple of weeks. Okay, any question, comment there? All of that in reference to what he means by critical philosophy. Okay. After all, if critical philosophy is his project, I have to talk about his whole project, you see. Who did I say? Yes.
You said that his metaphysical beliefs are based on moral knowledge and aesthetic
Yeah.
knowledge? Primarily those two, or does the first one come in?
The first one comes in as well, that's why I have this arrow coming down. Okay. His conclusion to, and we've got a bit of it in the anthology, his conclusion to the first critique is, in effect, no, we only have knowledge of appearances, phenomena. But on the other hand, for practical reasons, we're constrained to belief. You see, it's a little more than a psychology of belief. But again, he's appealing to what Hume and the Scottish realists called the proclivities of the human mind. You see, the proclivities of the human mind. Yeah. Yeah. So all three of them contribute to metaphysical beliefs. The trouble is that just as with Hume, people sometimes read just the first 4 sections, find Hume's a skeptic, and then forget what comes later. So with Kant, they read his negative conclusions and ignore what comes later. You see. But Hume's conclusion, just as Hume's conclusion is about belief, so Kant's conclusion is about belief. In fact, there's one place in his preface to the first critique where he says we'll have to do away with knowledge to make room for belief. Do away with knowledge to make room for belief. You see, what he's doing, if you want to go back to